Convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell wants a new trial.
The disgraced socialite plans to request a new trial after a juror revealed during deliberations that he was a victim of sexual abuse. Maxwell was convicted last week of conspiring to groom young girls to be abused by Jeffrey Epstein. Potential jurors filled out questionnaires asking if they, a friend, or a family member have ever been a victim of sexual harassment, sexual assault, or sexual abuse. According to the reports, prosecutors say the juror flew through the questionnaire and he didn't recall being asked if he had been a victim. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
Australia bars Novak Djokovic from entering the country after previously granting the unvaccinated tennis star a COVID medical exemption to play in the Aussie Open.
An exemption that has received significant blowback because of Australia's strict coronavirus guidelines. Jala Pulford is the acting sport minister for the state of Victoria.
As has been the case the whole time, no one is or will be receiving special treatment.
Djokovic's reps are now working on a legal challenge to his visa cancellation. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And a rough day on Wall Street over fears the Federal Reserve may take more decisive action against rising inflation. The Dow fell 392 points. The Nasdaq plunged 522, more than 3%. The Nasdaq's start to the new year is the worst since 2008. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Howdy, Chili's is serving y'all some Texas-sized family meal, because everything's bigger in Texas. Enjoy full racks of Chili's world-famous baby back ribs, margarita chicken, savory shrimp, beef fajita, smoked jalapeno sausages, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Man, this meal's bigger than Bill's, but it ain't breaking the bank. Chili's has Texas-sized family meals for just $45 to feed your crew of 3 to 6 folks. For your youngins, just add $5 for a kid's meal. Chili's, more life and bigger meals happen here.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
The Eat Fresh Refresh goes on at Subway. You've tried the Cali Fresh steak. Now you can enjoy the Cali Fresh turkey. One of only 2 Cali Fresh subs. The Cali Fresh turkey is packed with deli-thin, oven-roasted turkey piled high on a bed of hickory smoked bacon, smashed avocado, and fresh mozzarella. Crafted for premium freshness, the Cali Fresh turkey is made on freshly baked, hearty, multi-grain bread with your choice of fresh veggies, hand-sliced daily in restaurants. Treat yourself to a Cali Fresh turkey today. Subway. Eat fresh.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Whoa. Yeah, you know, I could sit here and say that all day long, at least for 2 hours. It would really cut down on my show prep time, wouldn't it, Jose?
We know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah, for once. Yeah, at least I know what I was talking about. All right, let's go to Zemi Ikatni. So I'm going to switch here to Chamorro for a moment. I'd like to comment on these 2 editorials, but I don't quite know how to do it. So, haftay mano masangan I palabran ho-hum. Gifino Chamorro? Because these are a couple of ho-hum editorials, that's for sure. The Daily News, our view. Now is not the time for the community to be complacent about the Wuhan virus. When would the time to be complacent about the virus have ever occurred? I guess when you were sitting in that checkpoint out on Marine Corps Drive for an hour waiting to get to the place where a National Guardsman would say, wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. Okay, you can go. That would have been the time to be complacent, I guess. So here's what the Daily News is telling us today. With the surge in holiday Wuhan virus cases and the high probability that the Omicron variant of the virus is on Guam, now is not the time for the community to be complacent. Wow, I'm sure glad I read this. You know, I just felt when I woke up this morning, I kind of stretched a little bit, and before I got that first cup of coffee, I said, whoa, I'm feeling really complacent this morning. Did you feel the same way, Jose?
Only after I read this that I realized I was being complacent.
Well,
Before I wasn't.
Yeah, you didn't know that you were being complacent.
Now I know.
Yeah. In other words, if you're not scared to death, you're being complacent. On Tuesday, the government reported 210 positive Wuhan virus cases, the highest number of cases in a single day since October 29, 2021, near the end of the last surge. After beating 3 surges, our people know what to do, Governor Lulian Guerra said in a video message. We can do so much to prevent our hospital from running out of beds, to prevent unnecessary loss of life, and to prevent our healthcare workers from being overwhelmed. Now, she better not start talking about vaccination, because we probably got the highest vaccination rate of any place in the country, if not the whole wide world.
For being complacent.
Yeah. This is sensible advice that's too often ignored. We all know the Wuhan virus protocols by heart. They should not be ignored. And on Monday, there were 3 virus-related deaths reported. 2 of the 3 deaths tested positive when they arrived dead at the hospital, minimizing the necessity for physicians to do any diagnosis at all. Dr. Nathaniel Berg, chairman of the Governor's Physicians Advisory Group, also known as the PAG, said in a video message that anyone with Wuhan virus symptoms, a new cough or fever, a feeling of fatigue, or any of the other markers needs to get tested quickly. And if your symptoms are getting worse, you need more than that. You need to see your health care provider. Perhaps more importantly, if you're seeing a rapid progression of symptoms, you need to go to the emergency room. If you have diabetes, high blood pressure, or other significant medical conditions, this becomes particularly important. Berg also noted the importance of being vaccinated. Yeah, you know, there are a couple people on island that aren't vaccinated. I know one of them.
I know one of them.
Yeah, they're hard to find nowadays. You really got to have a search party to find somebody who's not vaccinated.
It would seem to make sense that those who are non-vaccinated stay away from the vaccinated so you don't get COVID.
Good idea, yeah. You know, they've just been fibbing to us from the very beginning. Well, you know, we're going to have to do the social distancing and the checkpoints and the masks and all this stuff until we get a vaccine. Once we get a vaccine, so then we got the vaccine. Okay, everybody run out now and get vaccinated. Everybody ran out and got vaccinated, and guess what we found out? People who were vaccinated were coming down with the Wuhan virus. Now you're not fully vaccinated if you don't have the booster. But, you know, the whole thing was just one series of fibs after another. If you are vaccinated and get infected, you are much less likely to get very sick. That's the important thing here. Yeah.
You know, those 3 people they talked about that passed away, all 3 were vaccinated.
Yeah, but they didn't get very sick.
No.
They didn't have time.
They didn't get that far.
Yeah, they didn't have enough time to get very sick, right? The facts about the Wuhan virus vaccines are out there. They are safe. They work to prevent serious illness and death from the virus. Those who refuse to listen to medical experts and tall tales and remain unvaccinated and uneducated only put themselves and their loved ones at risk. Yeah. Sure enough. Get vaccinated. Okay, then the Post. The Post, you know, I wonder if they collaborated. I wonder if there's an antitrust violation here. They're both running the same bunk in the same day. So here's the Post. If Omicron is like a super typhoon, why aren't we boarding up? False analogy here. Anyone who spent a good chunk of their life on Guam, that couldn't be me. I'm not there. I'm him. I'm he. My pronouns are he, him, and his. So this sentence could have said people who have spent a good chunk of their lives on Guam, but then we couldn't show off our political correctness, could we, Jose? The Post wouldn't be able to show that it's as woke as the New York Times. As the storm approaches, we gather supplies to sustain us through the days without water and weeks without power. Before it gets here, we remove debris and put away outdoor items that can damage homes or fly away. Most importantly, we board up our windows with shutters or plywood to safely ride out the worst of the storm. Anyone who's lived here through a direct hit and skipped any of these steps knows they're not optional. Not adequately preparing means a whole host of problems ahead. Well, I missed Karen, but I was here for Pamela, which was a pretty severe storm. Since December, Governor Leon Guerrero has compared Omicron, the new variant of Wuhan virus, to an impending super typhoon.
That's a local way of saying the sky is falling.
Exactly, yeah. Sa podong papa sky. Yeah, on Tuesday, the island recorded 210 new cases, the highest since October 29, 2021. See what I mean about copying? When 111 cases were reported at the tail end of a previous surge. A day later, Dr. Nathaniel Berg, chairperson, I wonder if I just held the Daily News up to the mirror, the Daily News editorial up to the mirror, I wouldn't need to read this one, right? So now the governor's metaphorical super typhoon is hitting us. It begs the question. No, it doesn't beg the question. Begging the question means building your question on a fact not proven. Jose, when did you stop beating your wife? That's begging the question. Because in order to answer the question, Jose has to admit that he beat his wife. That is begging the question. Stating something that causes an inquiry is not begging the question. Confessions of an English teacher, right? Why are we boarding up? Social gatherings remain expanded, even though the governor admits it contributes to higher case numbers. 2, quarantine policies for inbound travelers haven't been strengthened. 3, no announcements have been made about how this new surge will affect the rest of the school year, despite evidence that Omicron is highly transmissible. 4, no plans to increase booster shot clinics or strategies to increase the number of residents getting boosters have been shared. A special address from the governor this week on rising counts announced no additional restrictions or actions except for expanding testing hours and using a better kind of test. I have a special request here, Governor. Please don't shut down outdoor dining until after Saturday so I can make my traditional trip to Touray on Saturday morning. We've been wearing our masks, washing our hands, watching our distance. We've been good kids. and availing of COVID-19 medical options collectively since the last surge, meaning after and well before these public health, quote, storms on island. If the governor truly believes a typhoon is hitting us, then where are the policies that reflect this narrative? The narrative is always more important than the facts. Remember the orange letters on that sign? Yeah. It's always the narrative, not the facts. Perhaps we are seeing a ramping up of efforts. Berg announced in his own video message this week that the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Services has placed an order of antiviral pills to treat some who contract Wuhan virus. DPHSS recommended, and the Mayor's Council has concurred with delaying a planned reopening of senior citizen centers initially scheduled for January. Oh, those mayors, man, you give them a chance to avoid some work, they'll be they'll be on it like a, they're right. The Mayor's Council and the principals have shared SOPs on how to avoid work.
One page.
I'll get to that. I'll get to that in the card. Both government and the media have been accused of fear-mongering.
No way.
Oh,
I don't believe that.
The fear-mongering, the media?
Including this editorial.
Including this very editorial. When the rhetoric of our leaders doesn't match their actions, it's hard to argue against that criticism. If the majority of the government's strategy to deal with Omicron and a holiday-related surge is for us to do a better job at what we've already been doing, perhaps it's time to retire the typhoon metaphor. Let's give them a hand. There's finally something worthwhile in this editorial. Getting more kids vaccinated, more residents boosted, and more patients in treatment early is a sound strategy that's seen us through most of the pandemic. But it's not the bunker down mentality comparable to preparing for a typhoon, let alone a super typhoon. At this point, it's status quo, or what some would liken to call condition of readiness for. Well, I didn't like this editorial, and you'll recall that there are several bases upon which I judge editorials. A lack of mistakes being one, the underlying theory of the editorial being two. So I'll give them this. I'll give the Post this. They had a consistent underlying theory. I don't agree with the theory, but they brought it home. So from that standpoint, close to a blue star, even though I didn't agree with it. And contrary to popular belief, Tall Tales does entertain contrary points of view, provided that they're understandable. The proverbial stream of consciousness doesn't work very well on Tall Tales. Stream of consciousness metamorphosizing into a filibuster.
Some may find that a challenge.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. It's very true. Okay, so that's Demi Cotney for today. And now let's go straight to the card. And this is what I've got on the card for today. Obviously, Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. And then the next item on the card, you'll like this one, Guam Pet Hospital versus Brandon. Then principals versus the kids. I'm afraid the principals are going to win this one. Tall Tales versus separatists. And then Lincoln versus separatists. This is my opportunity to play the role of Bob the Iconoclast.
Is this President Lincoln?
The very Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. You'll remember. You probably remember him from school, Jose. What did Lincoln do, everybody?
He created the penny.
Right answer is he freed the slaves.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's his. That That's the hagiography of Abraham Lincoln. Oh, hey, Lincoln was great. He freed the slaves. Well, I've got a little revisionist history that comes from a website called Abbeville.com that continually restates the Southern point of view of various issues. And unlike our local separatists here, it's okay to discuss those views. When it comes to the separatists, our separatists here, when it comes to Chamorro self-determination, no discussion allowed. Yeah,
it's not debatable.
It's not debatable. I just saw that in the paper they put out. Then Lincoln versus separatists, and then I've got Who versus Fauci.
Who's on first?
Fauci.
Fauci's left field.
Fauci's not on first base.
He's left.
He's coming from left field,
yes,
right?
He is.
Yeah, he's coming out of left field, that's for sure. The left versus the Constitution, Turley versus Tribe. I may get to those sooner or later. And something else that I'm going to call your attention to is come January 1st, not only did we get a new year, but we got a new edition of the Pacific Island Times, which is, it's the best $1.25 you can spend on the island. And if you were to spend $1.25 on it, this is what you would see on page 8 right here. I can't make it work very well here in this camera angle. Let me see here. Yeah. You probably recognize the guy in the picture there, Tall Tales. It's called Contriving a Status Option. And I'll just give you a hint of what it's about. In an earlier column, I answered the question, who's working to decolonize Guam? The answer, nobody. No one is working to decolonize Guam. And it winds up by saying this. As explained in earlier columns, the unincorporated territory of Guam has more flexibility and autonomy than does a state, especially one with the weakness of smallness. For instance, only one member in the House. So go down to your nearest Payless or wherever you buy your newspapers, buy a copy of Pacific Island Times, and you too could chime in as a tailgater on that article. Okay, so let's get started with the card. Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. You all know what this is about. It's the old story of the agenda or the narrative versus the truth. And so often we see that the narrative, that one who speaks the narrative, as you were one who speaks the truth in the face of the narrative, could get canceled, have all kinds of bad things happen to them. Not him or her, but them. And if I were to say happen to him, I run the risk of getting canceled myself, because the narrative is that regardless of the external plumbing, you don't know if a person is a man or a woman until you ask that person what their pronouns are. So it's kind of like the rice that Paul Zerzan came along and had the temerity to say, you call it red, but it's actually orange. Let's call things by their right name, to which the Daily News came back and righteous indignation with a story, readers to Zerzan, leave our red rice alone. A classic paradigm for the narrative versus the truth. Okay, next item on the card is, let's see here, where am I? Yeah, next item on the card is Guam Pet Hospital versus Brandon. So today I gave another address to the Guam Rotary Club down at 3 Squares. And the title of my address was the Attorney General versus the Public Auditor. Sounds like a really interesting subject, right? You know which one of the media outlets covered my well-delivered speech?
Which one?
None of them. There was no need to, because they'd already run the Attorney General's press release. There was no need for them to come and pick up something like the Attorney General versus the public auditor. They got the Attorney General's press release. Their work is done. So regulars here on Tall Tales know exactly what I was talking about, that the Attorney General shoved some papers through the window at the Superior Court that really aren't a lawsuit. And one possible theory is that this was his way at snapping back at BJ and senators who criticized him for not taking action just because the governor's consigliere, and I use that word advisedly, went out and negotiated a contract with the Pacific Star Hotel. You know that whole story. I know it. You know it. The Attorney General knows it. But the Attorney General, the people who read the papers that the Attorney General filed in court will not know it because it's not mentioned there. Okay, so before I go to Guam Pet Hospital versus Brandon, it looks like I got somebody in the green room. Let's see.
It's been a while.
R. Fred. 3 things politicians address every election year, from R. Fred. Okay, our Fred, long time no hear.
Yeah, Judge, but don't worry. I've been listening to your show avidly.
Good.
Don't worry.
All right.
I'm here.
Good.
I'm just listening and sucking it all in.
Good
and,
call,
finally
Alfred.
Finally today I had to call because, you know what, 3 things that politicians are elected for and 3 things that their platform is always on is, as you know, public safety, public health, and education. And you tell me, Bob, after the 4 years and previous 4 years and previous 4 years, is our health care, is our education system, and is our public safety better today? I highly doubt it. But these are the same 3 things that we elect them for. So every politician right now should ask themselves, did I improve public safety while in office? Did I improve health care for the island residents? Did I improve education? And every citizen that elects them should ask the same question. The same person that's running again, did they improve public safety, public health, and education? And that's what we should base our vote on. Because, Bob, you know, public health is suffering. Our hospital, the treatments offered here are the same or probably worse now than before. Our education system, you can't blame COVID. Our education system is lagging behind. Our public safety is worse than ever. I mean, look at the crime rate, the drug rate, the theft, cars being stolen, houses, garages being broken into, businesses being broken into. Heck, the schools are being broken into. All these 3 different platforms have not been addressed, which they run for.
Good
That's
point,
why I wanted to call you.
Good point, Alfred.
Instead, politicians are focusing on village name changes and self-determination, which is pathetic because I think we're doing fine under the U.S. flag, and I think we should ask all those hundreds of thousands of Chamorros that live in the U.S., why have they moved to the U.S. to be closer to the U.S.? And here we're wondering about being colonized by the colonial power. But the same locals that live here have moved to be closer to the colonial power. So it's only a few members on top that are really wishing this for self-serving interest. But that's where the energy is focused on. It should be on public safety, public health, and education.
I can't.
For God's sake.
Once again, Alfred, it's really hard to argue with someone who seems to be so well informed on the issue. So I'm glad you came back and let us be enlightened with that. I got a break for a commercial here, Alfred, but thanks again. Nice talking to you.
See if you can talk about it. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, bye-bye.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Portions of the program brought to you by Nissan. Choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR, 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are, continuing on, getting back to the calendar here. First item on the calendar after systemic racism is Guam Pet Hospital versus Brandon. And I was telling you that I gave a speech at the Rotary today, and I met the guy that runs, or that's starting Guam Pet Hospital, and there are a couple of things about him I really like. First of all, he's a tailgater, and I'm going to borrow a page from Will Rogers' book. Will Rogers, a famous comedian back in the 1930s, early 40s, once upon a time said, "I never met a man I didn't like." I'll copy that and say, "I never met a tailgater I didn't like." So I like him because he's a tailgater. I also like him because his name is Bob, and I'm going to show you the third reason that I like him.
You've never met a Bob you'd never liked.
I never met a Bob I didn't like, yeah. So I'm going to show you the third reason that I like Bob, but I'm going to have to do a walkabout in order to do it. But for you guys out there in the international radio listening audience, Jose is going to do a play-by-play. So even though you can't see something very interesting, Jose will describe it in the play-by-play. Are you ready, Jose?
Let's proceed. Looks like Bob is getting up from his chair.
Here we go.
He's doing his walkabout to the other side. He's getting near to that prestigious area that Montesilva usually occupies in the morning. And let's see, crowds, there he stands in front of the camera. For those of you that are not watching on Facebook or online YouTube, his shirt reads, "Let's go, Brandon." And that in the middle of the shirt is not our infamous Brandon, but is our former president, Donald Trump. And the crowd goes wild.
So anybody who gives me a "Let's Go Brandon" t-shirt's got to be a really nice guy. There's just no getting around that. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Guam Pet Hospital, etc. And once again, thank you, Colin Clark. Colin gave me a Hoffa Brown t-shirt last year. So anybody who gives me a t-shirt can't be all bad, that's for sure.
Don't forget Tracy, is that her name, with the mug?
Oh, yeah, Tracy gave me a "Let's Go Brandon" mug. So I'm making a collection of "Let's Go Brandon" memorabilia, right? Okay, so that's that item on the show. I guess I can change the focus of my camera now a little bit. There it is. "Let's Go Brandon." And you recognize the face there and the mustache, I'm sure. Next item on the card is principals versus the kids. School principals versus the kids. And the title of this story that ran in the Daily News, School Principals Don't Want to Make Up 24 Instructional Lost Days. They don't want to make up those days. And one of the principals was asked, you don't want to make up those days? Why not? And the answer was, it's the principle of the thing. We have our principles. Guam Department of Education Deputy Superintendent Joe Sanchez presented 4 different options to help make up for the 24 instructional days students missed during a work session meeting. In accordance with Public Law 31019, the approved school calendars consists of 173 school days, 2 teacher work days, 2 parent-teacher conference days, 9 professional staff development days, 3 golfing days, 1 chess day, 4 tennis days, 3 days to rest.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Exactly. Though other principals wanted other options, adding days for students who need extra instruction time or to the end of the school year, the majority seemed to be in favor of the option to request a waiver from the legislature to not make up 24 days of instructional loss. Now, I'm going to step right in here, and for all you principals that are listening, the legislature can't give you a waiver, except maybe one of these. You could stand by the side of the road and you too could be a waiver, right?
Denied.
Principals who wanted the waiver felt that it was unnecessary to make up those days as students already attended school throughout the regular scholastic year, both physically and online. They also believe that it will overload the teachers with challenges they are still facing due to the consistent and abrupt changes of the models of learning. The teachers and staff have really, quote, this is a quote, the teachers and staff have really gone through a lot with having to address the mitigation and safety and then the academic challenges with the 3 different modes of learning, and we're still in this pandemic, said Inarahan Middle School Principal Derek Santos. Derek Santos, congratulations. You got your name mentioned on Tall Tales, but not in a very constructive manner. Derek goes on to say, extending the 24 days is just going to compound the issue with their mental health, and I really want that to be considered. Boy, Derek is really looking out for the kids and their mental health, right? So, you know, as I read this thing, I see a new skill developing here, the skill of trying to figure out some way to continue to draw a government of Guam paycheck without working. Like we did at the beginning of the pandemic. You know, okay, everybody go home. You're going to continue to get paid while you're at home. But don't worry, if you have to work, we're going to give you a pen that costs $1.64. And then you remember the mad scramble for double pay that actually went nowhere, but it was so important that Tina Rose Munya Barnes waived the public hearing requirement on Joe San Augustine's bill that would have provided double pay until Joe San Augustine asked that the session be postponed so he could give notice and have a public hearing. I didn't make that. That is not a tall tale. That's a true. That's an actual true story. Yeah. So now we've got a situation where, you know, kids are supposed to have, I think, 180 days of instruction, but according to the calculations that the leadership of the department made, they missed 24 days. But it's okay. We shouldn't have to do anything more because we're thinking of the mental health of the students, perhaps not the mental acuity of the students. At least in theory, the longer you go to school, the smarter you will be. And I don't know if it always works. I went to school for over 20 years, and look what happened to me.
They're dumb, but they're happy.
Guam board member Robert Crisostomo asked Guam DOE staff and principals if they will be able to specifically find out the skill level of each student by the end of the school year. Teachers and students are burnt out. It was just a bad year for everybody, but it's the students who missed out on the instructional time, said Chrysostomo. I just need to know if they're a grade behind or a year ahead, so that way I can talk to the other board members at the next meeting on exactly what we need to do to catch up. And Ray and I chatted about this morning on the Ray Gibson Show, and I said, if we can do that, that is, if we are able to specifically find out the skill level of each student at the end of the school year, why aren't we doing it every year? If that's possible, we should be doing it every year. That way, and this is what I told Ray this morning, that way we wouldn't have people out in the community complaining because they hired high school graduates who couldn't spell cat without using a K. Additionally, based on board union contract, Chrysostomo said teachers have already met their contractual agreement with Guam DOE. In response, Sanchez said, doable as schools are, they're already working towards implementing the new grading policy for the past year. Sanchez said every assignment, quiz, test, and project has to be aligned to the standards of the grade level and those specific content areas. What it means is when a teacher puts a grade on a student's report card, that's the teacher's professional attestation of that student's achievement. One of the measures we can provide at the end of the semester is what we call traditional marks analysis for grade distribution. We can see for every subject area in the district exactly what level the students are based on the grade they received, said Sanchez. And you know, every time we publish these kinds of statistics, there's one group of people in the United States that's very happy. Everybody who lives in Mississippi. Yeah. Although principals and education board members present at the work session seem to be in favor of the waiver, Sanchez said that they will still bring up the discussion again in the next GB meeting in case the other members might be in favor of the other options. So waiver. You know, as I said earlier, there's no way that the legislature can provide a waiver. Now, I'm going to direct your attention to 1 GCA section 715A14, which reads, and this is the definitional section of Guam law, and it defines an adequate education, adequate public education. Number 14, as you were, number 13, at least 180 instructional days or its equivalents, including make-up hours each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendared school year. Now that wasn't exactly the Every Child Act as it was enacted. The words or its equivalents were added in by Senator Narissa Underwood. A big mistake, I thought, because it just leaves too much room for weaseling. But anyhow, it says 180 instructional days or its equivalent, including make-up hours each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendared school year. So there's your union dimension. If the calendared school year is to end on June 1, that means that school can't go beyond July 1, according to the law. Now, that statute was amended by, let's see, Public Law 35-84, and the following language was added. Provided that the Guam Department of Education is exempt from the requirements of this Section 17L13 for school year 2019-2020. So in other words, they changed the law saying, according to this change, whoever drafted this, you could have just 1 day of instruction, or you wouldn't have to have any at all, and it would still be an adequate public education. So if you don't want to make up the days and you want to stay within the law, board members, what you got to do then is someone has to draft up a bill. You have to get a senator to introduce it. It has to go on for public hearing. After the public hearing, a committee report has to be prepared. Majority of the members of the committee have to vote to do pass, or at least report out. Then you have to figure out how to get it on the agenda of the legislature. When it comes up for second reading, there will be discussion, and someone may make a motion to move the bill to third reading. When it goes to third reading, if the majority of the members present vote aye, it will then be sent to the governor, who can sign it or veto it. If she vetoes, it comes back to the legislature, where 10 members could override the governor's veto. That's not a waiver. That's the enactment of a law. And and while I'm at it, one of the people that may not vote either aye or nay would be Senator Shelton, because this might be too complicated for her. The last time she voted on something, she waited until the roll was called and passed 3 times before she finally voted no. This was on the override of Bill 11. So as much as we've talked about Bill 11, and as long as it's been around, and as easy as it is to understand, it took Senator Shelton to have that bill actually, the roll call vote actually come up before she finally did something about it. She passed 3 times and then finally made up her mind and voted no. The mental capacity of someone who would pull a stunt like this, not being aware enough to vote on something when the roll call comes along to her name. That's really something. So we're taking you at your word, Senator Shelton. You just couldn't decide until...
Perez.
I'm sorry, Senator.
Yeah.
Was Perez?
It was Perez, yeah.
I thought it was Shelton.
I think she voted no. Yeah. It's hard to determine, to differentiate between the two.
Yeah.
I know one's a strict environmentalist and the other one works for Antelope.
No, I think it was Shelton.
Okay, you did.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But close.
I'll look it up, yeah.
It's close. So anyhow, there's no such thing as a waiver. If you don't want to make up the days, you have to change the law over there at the board. Next, let's take a short break here before we go on to Tall Tales versus Separatists.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Okay, so we took a short break here, and that was just time enough for Kellis to call. And Kellis wants to talk about how to skip a grade or graduate without attending school. Kellis cites a precedent. Tell us about it, Kellis.
Hey, Judge. So basically what I'm sitting there thinking about, there's a precedent set by the Port 7. So when they got their were repaid for all their back pay. They were now, first of all, you have to keep in mind, I think they were originally fired for a cause, right? They were not the greatest employees. But when they were repaid their back pay, they all got as if they got all their raises, as if they were the number one, et cetera. You know what I'm saying? The best employees that were fired. So I think all the GovGuam students that are out, they should just be all given straight A's for this period of time, and then they could explain it so that when they apply for like Yale or Harvard or wherever, they can just say, we were in Guam and we were during COVID, so we all got straight A's.
That's a very good point, Kellis. We have some stare decisis here, right? Something that courts use. So the rule that came out of the commercial out of the port was that these employees that were fired and then reinstated got reinstated with all of the raises that they would have gotten had they been employed. Now, the record shows that before they got fired, they were perhaps marginal employees. But when it came time to calculate how much money the government owed them, the fiction that the port engaged in was that they were top-notch employees, and this cost over I think it was $160,000 more that these people got. So I made the remark yesterday that these folks were better off getting fired than they would have been if they'd stayed on the job because they made more money. So if we
that's what I'm saying. We got these for example.
So if we extrapolate that proposition to the kids who missed several days of school, we don't know exactly what grades they would have achieved because they weren't in school. So we'll just give them all the highest grades that they could have gotten. Therefore, they'll all pass. They'll all be honor students. And probably some of them could petition for graduation because obviously there's nothing more they could learn from going to school. They've learned it all already.
And possibly they could have like college prep courses, college credit. So some of them might be almost to an associate's degree.
It's very possible. Now, we could ask Rory, how to go about doing this, but I can tell you what Rory's going to tell you. I can't talk about it. It's a personnel matter.
Well, and, especially if you're talking about students,
Yeah, well,
you can't talk about that.
He would actually say, I can't talk about that. It's a personnel matter unless any of the students named Joanne Brown. Then I'll jabber about it all day long if you want to.
Okay, Judge.
Good talking to you. Good point, Kellis, as usual. You got right to the heart of the matter. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, that's Kellis.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, Kellis always nails it. He never filibusters. He never soapboxes. He just, boom, there you go. Good point, Kellis. Okay, so I was going to launch into separatists. Let's see, Tall Tales versus separatists. And, I've gone to some lengths to tell you that this 20-page insert that ran with the December 6th Pacific Daily News is propaganda from the Guam Independence Commission. The actual technical name of which is Commission on Decolonization for the Implementation and Exercise of Chamorro Self-Determination. The commission this chapter 21 of Title I was created by the legendary Hope Cristobal during the time that she was a senator, and I think we're all kind of familiar with Hope. If not, we're going to run Hope's screen test again on Monday, or perhaps if we do it often enough, a studio in Hollywood would come out and sign Hope up for one of their newest movies. I don't want to be, really nasty here or anything like that and say a horror movie, but you could use your own imagination. Yeah, it's a Hope Cristobal production, and as far as we can tell, Hope and Melvin Wanpat are the face and voice of the separatist movement. Pay no attention to that papier-mâché commission called the Commission on Decolonization for the Implementation and Exercise of Chamorro Self-Determination. They apparently have little to say about what Melvin is going to do. So I've pointed out that the process here is, if you read this, there are several small gates, and as you go through each gate, the ticket to get through the gate is the recognition that a colony is really, really bad. Guam is a colony, and that's really, really bad. Sovereignty is really, really good. So what the people on Guam should be trying to achieve is sovereignty, which means separation and independence from the United States of America. So I've been going through this this propaganda sheet and pointing out to you where these gates are and how they swing. But I'm going to come back to this right after the big halftime show we've all been waiting for.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Omicron sparks school troubles. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. Many school systems are struggling with a surge in COVID cases. Chicago canceling classes for a second day as teachers refuse to return without more safety protocols. Mayor Lori Lightfoot urging teachers to return to class on Friday.
Anybody who does that will be paid. Anybody who shows up for our kids and honors their commitment and obligation, we will welcome them with open arms. For those who do not, we will not pay.
And in New York City, with the nation's largest school district,
many New York City public schools have sent students back to remote learning at home with renewed concerns over COVID. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there were close to 46,000 new cases of COVID-19 reported in New York City on Wednesday, bringing the total number of people with COVID in the city to close to 1.8 million.
Fox's Laura Ingle. The CDC offering help. The director gave the green light for children 12 and up to get Pfizer booster shots. Thursday marks 1 year since rioters stormed the Capitol. A series of remembrances is planned to mark the event that shook the country.
Lawmakers will hold a prayer vigil. Some will give testimonials about the violence, and they'll hear from President Biden. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
He will, of course, speak to the moment, to the importance in history of the peaceful transfer of power, of what we need to do to protect our own democracy.
Psaki also says the president's going to speak about what role he believes former President Trump had in the events of that day. Meanwhile, a post on the former president's website says he'll talk about January 6th at a rally later this month. Jill Nato, Fox News.
America's listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Another winter storm is taking aim for the East Coast just days after a storm hammered the mid-Atlantic, trapping hundreds of drivers on I-95 in Virginia. Governor Ralph Northam declaring a state of emergency ahead of this storm, which he did not do on Monday.
Northam maintains a state of emergency would have made no difference because it snowed more and faster than first thought. Virginia transportation officials say they decided against pre-treating the highway because heavy rain arrived first and would have washed away road salt before the snow began. Washington Post columnist Charles Lane wondered how bad this could have been if most of the cars were electric.
Fox's Rich Edson. 4 months after leaving Afghanistan, the Biden administration continues to face criticism for leaving some 20,000 Afghans behind.
No jobs have been lost over what many see as a botched evacuation. Scott Mann is a former Green Beret who founded Task Force Pineapple, a group of veterans dedicated to rescuing Afghan commandos, interpreters, and their families. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill, including Mike Waltz, urging the administration to rescue the commandos, now in hiding, fearing for their lives.
Fox's Lucas Tomlinson. And police in Florida are searching for whoever delivered a very definitive message to a certain group of people.
The search is on for the person in Palm Beach who placed flyers on the cars of people from New York in the area stating that if you're one of those woke people, leave Florida. You'll be happier elsewhere, as will we. Politically, being woke means the person is aware of racial and social justice issues. Palm Beach is the new hometown of former President Trump, who said last year that being woke means you are a loser. A Palm Beach police captain told the Palm Beach Post law enforcement is searching for a law that could be used to charge the person who issued the messages. Kevin Uretsky, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Howdy, Chili's is serving y'all some Texas-sized family meal, because everything's bigger in Texas. Enjoy full racks of Chili's world-famous baby back ribs, margarita chicken, savory shrimp, beef fajita, smoked jalapeno sausages, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Man, this meal's bigger than Bill's, but it ain't breaking the bank. Chili's has Texas-sized family meals for just $45 to feed your crew of 3 to 6 folks. For your youngins, just add $5 for a kid's meal. Chili's, more life and bigger meals happen here.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
So here we are, the big halftime show at Tall Tales. And picking up here on Tall Tales versus separatism. And I've pointed out to you on many occasions that this 20-page insert is an instrument of gaslighting, a careful study of which will cause you to think that a colony, anytime you use the word colony, that's the end of the story. Colony always means bad. So if Guam is a colony, that means bad. It's something that we must escape from as soon as we can. Now, of course, a lot of folks from Guam have escaped the colony and moved to the United States. There are more Chamorros in the U.S. mainland than there are in Guam. But that's another story. Colony is bad. Sovereignty is good. So what the ultimate destination of the island of Guam should be, it should be a sovereign, independent state, independent from the United States. That's what this 20-page supplement will try to convince you if you read it, not in one swell swoop, or is it fell swoop? Not in one well-worded paragraph, but with a little nibble here and a little nibble there. So as you go through what I call gates, the ticket to get through each gate is to recognize independence good, sovereignty good, colony bad. The next part I'm going to talk about is labeled, this is on page 6, what is Guam's current legal status? Guam was officially classified as an unincorporated territory in the 1950 Organic Act. That's true. And I've pointed out in print that the way to change Guam's political status from an unincorporated territory to an incorporated territory would require an amendment to our Organic Act, which is a federal statute. All that would have to be done would be to strike 2 letters from one word, so that instead of saying Guam, the island of Guam is an incorporated territory instead of unincorporated territory. Now, if you ask the average person which is better, incorporated or unincorporated, incorporated sounds a lot better than unincorporated, doesn't it?
Well, you're in.
Yeah, it certainly would sound better to certain groups of Democrats, right? But actually, the opposite is true. We're much better off being an unincorporated territory than an incorporated territory. Short explanation is that an incorporated territory has all the disadvantages of statehood, none of the advantages. The Constitution of the United States applies to incorporated territories ex proprio vigere, in other words, of its own force. So that means you got to pay U.S. income tax, you got to pay U.S. customs duties, etc. All the rules that apply to the 50 states apply to you. But then, of course, you get to vote for congressmen and senators and presidents, right? Wrong. You don't get any more voting rights than what we have right now. 1 non-voting delegate to Congress.
Denied.
The first time Hawaii ever elected its own government, its own governor, was after it became a state. Up until that time, the president... 1959. Up until that time, well, 1960, actually. Up until that time, the President of the United States appointed the governor of the territory of Hawaii. Income tax applied, folks in Hawaii were subject to on and on and on. All the disadvantages of statehood, none of the advantages. An unincorporated territory, however, because the Constitution does not apply ex proprio vigere, according to Downs versus Bidwell, the leading item of the insular cases, which does not talk about Anglo-Saxon, not being able to understand Anglo-Saxon law and all of the fiction put out by Ann Paris Hattori. But because the revenue clause doesn't apply, the revenue clauses don't apply, we have our really favorable status here where we pay what looks like federal income tax, but we get to spend it here on the island. And we also get the income taxes paid by military personnel stationed on the island. So it's a pretty sweet deal in that regard. But here's what this article says. Guam was officially classified as an unincorporated territory in the 1950 Organic Act. unincorporated territories are possessions of, but not an integral part of the United States. Any and all decisions pertaining to unincorporated U.S. territories are subject to Article 4, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution, which states that the Congress shall have the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property of the United States. Now, this is a real surprise to people to tailgaters, right, Jose? How many times have I read that Article 4, Section 3 during this program? Yeah, we all know that. This is nothing new. As an unincorporated territory of the U.S., Guam is considered by many scholars like Michael Bavacqua and like Melvin Borja. Yeah, many scholars who shall remain unnamed, right?
3 out of 4 dentists say.
Yeah. Many scholars to be foreign in a domestic sense and domestic in a foreign sense. Many scholars have told us this, yeah. This legal doctrine sets forth the way in which Guam is treated within the United States system of government. Simply put, in all foreign matters, territories are considered to be domestic parts of the United States, just like states are considered to be domestic parts of the United States. Whereas in all domestic matters, territories are considered to be foreign parts of the U.S. Wrong. Just wrong. And I'd like to see your bibliography on this one, Mr. Wanpat, that the territories are considered to be foreign parts of the United States, because that's certainly not what any of the insular cases says. Certainly not Downs versus Bidwell. It's something I think that you guys made up.
What would be a foreign part of the United States?
Well,
an embassy of another country?
Well, they're not saying that. They're saying that territories are considered to be foreign parts of the United States. In other words, the sentence doesn't even make any sense.
None.
If it said foreign rather than parts of the United States,
you go.
It would be wrong, but it would at least make sense. Yeah. But that's not the point of this 20-page insert. It's not to make sense. It's a narrative. It's an extremely well-developed narrative to convince you, once again, colony bad, sovereignty good. Let's become independent of the United States. Within the U.S. legal system, Guam is therefore seen as important, but not an integral part of the United States. And then on top of the page, the next page in green type, the people of Guam have the responsibility to learn and understand what each option means for their island so they can make a decision based on what they envision for the future of their home. Now, the only way that this can make sense in the context of this 20-page supplement is if the people of Guam mean Chamorros.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, this thing doesn't make any sense, because I've already read sections that tell you that the Chamorros have almost a God-given right to determine the destiny of this island. And if you moved here from someplace else, that ain't you, right? So when they say the people of Guam, that has to mean that Chamorros have the responsibility to learn and understand what each option means for their island, so that they can make a decision based on what they envision for the future of their home. A nice way to bring people who are not Chamorros along. Yeah, we need to know that because, it is our home. Well, no, it's not your home, according to this. You are a colonizer.
Killer.
Yeah, a killer. You're nothing but a colonizer, a killer. Yeah. And this was from a lady who said, Guahuli Tautanu. I authored the Decolonization Commission law. You're a colonizer. You need to get out of here. You need to leave. You need to leave. If you haven't seen
We don't know why we're saying it, but we're going to repeat it anyways.
Absolutely. If you haven't seen Hope Cristobal's screen test, make sure you're tuned in on Monday, because we'll play it again. Guam is one of 17 remaining non-self-governing territories in the world. The status quo has brought Guam impediments and benefits. It has also brought continuous change to Guam, change that its people have no voice in shaping. No voice in shaping. It's just this deus ex machina that creates all these changes. Who can be in business here? How we're going to go about our business? Everything that happens at the legislature. On and on and on. History has proven that the status quo has been detrimental to Guam's people by hindering their economic, political, and cultural development. Which history would that be?
Interesting enough, and I know this is a sidebar, there's this story that Chrysostom was doing in the States of documenting how Chamorros in the States are perpetuating their culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not being hindered.
They're not being hindered at all. Yeah, but this is part of the narrative, of course, that history has proven that the status quo has been detrimental to Guam's people by hindering their economic, political, and cultural development. Now, history, where did this history come from? Howard Zinn? That's the tenor of this whole thing, the flavor of the whole thing. It has a Howard Zinn dimension to it. History. History? Herman History, I guess, is who it's just somebody we haven't met yet, right?
Herman story. Herman. That's confusing.
It is, yeah. History. So apparently there's somebody named History out there. Maybe he'll call in, maybe they'll call in someday. History has proven that the status quo has been detrimental to Guam's people, etc. These challenges have come to Guam's shores with little to no input from the people of the island. So, when changes came to the shores of Hawaii, did the people of Hawaii have input? Did they put up, did they say, if you aren't Tautau, you can't come to Hawaii? Or was it open to anyone who wanted to come? And that's what statehood means. An independent Guam? No. If it's an independent Guam, you can't come here unless you have a visa. And we don't issue visas to just any old buddy. The only way out of colonization is decolonization, achieving self-governance and ending the status quo will finally allow Guam to reach its fullest potential. So once again, what do they mean by self-governance? It can't be statehood. It's got to be independence. So I'm going to stop there for today on the 6th of January, and we'll pick this up again tomorrow, and I'll keep working on it. And if you have any questions, please call in. I will change the rules for this one part of the show, and I will actually stop my narrative to deal with your questions if you call in during that part of the calendar called Tall Tales versus Separatists. Okay, next item on the calendar is Lincoln versus Separatists. And I thought this is quite appropriate. Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, during the time that we actually had some real separatism. And if you read the conservative stuff on the internet nowadays, a lot of folks are saying we are bound to either have a civil war or to divide ourselves into two countries, one red and one blue, because the difference between the red and blue states is so severe, it doesn't seem like they could ever reach an accommodation that would allow the country to continue. And and I think there's an awful lot of wisdom in that statement when we see, and of course I'm very biased here, when we see the Democrats saying we've got to overhaul that Constitution that you guys think is so important. You know, this idea of every state having 2 senators so that a little state like Wyoming with only not even 800,000 people has the same number of California with 40 million people. We got to do something about that. And this electoral college thing, you know, where somebody who doesn't get a majority of the votes can become president. This has always been bad, but if you ever needed any proof about how bad it really is, I'll give you one thing: Donald Trump. We've got to change the Constitution. Otherwise, we're going to have Donald Trump. So these are the kinds of things that the folks over there on the left want to change. 9 justices on the Supreme Court? No, no, no. The Supreme Court has to have a majority of progressives. And we'll work on that no matter how many times we have to increase the size of the Supreme Court.
Sounds like a living wage.
It does. And this whole thing about the filibuster in the Senate, it's not constitutional, but it's one of those kinds of things that brings about accommodation, compromise, etc. And, you know, when you have these kinds of provisions, you oftentimes don't wind up with something that anybody really wants, but you wind up with something that everybody can live with. And an awful lot of the stuff that the left wants, I don't know if I could live with. 60 million babies couldn't live with it, that's for sure. So these are the kinds of divisions that are prying us apart. So I thought it would be interesting to go back to Abraham Lincoln, who everybody knows freed the slaves and everybody knows kept the country together. I'm going to put on my iconoclast costume for this because I'm going to tell you that Abraham Lincoln hagiography doesn't apply to Abraham Lincoln. We don't need to study him for statehood. So here it goes. I have an article written by Ilana Mercer in a publication called the Abbeville Institute, which I told you a little earlier, states the Southern point of view about public issues, popular issues. And what I'm going to tell you here is the reconstruction, as you were the historical, what's the word I'm looking for, revisionist view of history of Civil War. The true legacy of Lincoln usually gets drowned in the perennial gush about a president whose name is synonymous with the freedom and the end of slavery. Lincoln's role in bringing to an end the Jefferson ideal of limited constitutional government with powers vested in sovereign states remains relatively unexamined. Jefferson's idea of a limited government, constitutional government with powers vested in sovereign states, which I keep raving about here on the show. That's why I don't use the word federal government, because we don't have one anymore. We have a national government. The direction in which Lincoln took America is not without significance for Canadians. For one, the current vilification of the Canadian West resembles in tenor the vilification of the American South. Westerners and Quebecers have grown accustomed to the boorish responses from government when they speak of exercising freedom of association by peaceful succession. That's Canadians' western provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, maybe British Columbia. The seeds of the assorted libel they confront can be traced to the Lincoln legacy. So what Lincoln did even affects Canadian popular wisdom. As a chronicler of Lincoln, Professor Tom DiLorenzo notes, quote, in 1861, most Americans, North and South, still believed that the right of secession was fundamental to preserving freedom and self-government. There were stirrings of the New England secessionists in 1803, as well as a secessionist movement of the Middle Atlantic states in 1861. Some abolitionists, like Horace Greeley, said the Northeast should secede from the Union because of slavery.
Wow.
Yeah. The South's battle, very plainly, was for its constitutionally guaranteed independence framed by the Founding Fathers' vision of a limited central government with little jurisdiction over state institutions, which sounds right to me. It's the kind of thing I've been talking about. The view of secession as the bulwark of liberty was widely echoed among prominent intellectuals and editorialists of the day. Lord Acton, the great classical liberal, viewed Southern secession as an attempt to preserve a constitutional liberty. Now, you remember Lord Acton's famous statement about power. Lord Acton said, "Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely." That's the guy. Abolitionists in the North generally agreed that the South had a right to peacefully secede, as they claimed the right for themselves. This is 1861. It would be ironic if this weren't the case. After all, the American Revolution was born of secession from empire. Now, I hope you local separatists are listening to this. This ought to be music to your ears. The Constitution was a pact between sovereign states with which the ultimate power lay, and these states devolved to the central power government its limited powers. With this, quote, confederation of sovereign states, the founders intended to curb the overreach of a central government. Yeah. With only 15% of Southerners being slave owners, the South was no more fighting to preserve slavery than the North was fighting to abolish it. Hey, Bob, that's not true. The North wanted to abolish slavery. Now, if you're a revisionist, you realize that with the three-corner trade for cotton, rum, and slaves, the North made probably as much money off slavery as the South did, but we're not supposed to talk about that. Let's accept, for the sake of argument, Lincoln's facade and grant that slavery was the reason he waged the war between the states, thus violating the Constitution. My Southern friends don't talk about the Civil War. They talk about the War of Northern Aggression. Surely, in order to redeem him, it's essential to establish, at the very least, that to this alleged end, Lincoln was morally justified in causing the death of more than 620,000 people, the maiming of thousands, and the near destruction of 40% of the nation's economy. To Mises Institute scholar David Gordon, the answer is clear. The costs of an action, writes Gordon, in secession, state, and liberty, cannot be dismissed as irrelevant to morality. The Lincoln vision can certainly be gleaned from views such as the one he expressed in an 1862 letter to the New York Daily Tribune. Quote, "My paramount object is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or to destroy slavery." All right, let's head for Wrigley Field, and we'll come back to Abraham Lincoln after the seventh inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Portions of the program brought to you by Nissan. Choose your favorite Nissan, and there's an abundance of Nissan automobiles to choose from. Rogues, Rogue Sports, Muranos, Kicks, Sentras, Leafs, Rogues, and then start talking about the deal they want to put together for you. Enjoy 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on them. Just sign and drive away. Inventory limited, so don't wait. See Nissan Guam first. Wait, there's the fine print. I got to read the thing in fine print ease. On approved credit, 3 payments calculated, 5% APR, 60 months term, and based on the actual selling price of the vehicle only, not including down payment or any aftermarket products or accessories. See Nissan Guam for full details.
So here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago. Lincoln was from Illinois. Chicago was in Illinois, although most folks in Illinois hate to admit it. Talk about secession. The folks in what is called downstate Illinois would really like Chicago to secede from the state. But here we are anyhow, talking about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War. The Lincoln vision can certainly be gleaned from views such as the one he expressed in an 1862 letter to the New York Daily Tribune. Quote, "My paramount object is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." That's what he said. Keeping the races apart is another recurrence in Lincoln's addresses. Could he have held these racist views? Ooh, Lincoln was a racist. The kind that made him a one-time supporter of a scheme advocating the shipping of slaves back to their own native land, and still wage war solely to free the objects of his derision? Perhaps, but unlikely given his subsequent actions. For one, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation guaranteed that slaves were freed only in the parts of the Confederacy accessible to the Union Army. He did this as commander-in-chief of the Army. It was one of his war powers, dealing with the enemy property, basically. In areas loyal to the Union, slaves were not emancipated. After the war, Lincoln offered little land to the freedmen. Most of the land was parceled off to his constituent power base, the railroad and mining companies. A little-known fact, Abraham Lincoln owned stock in the Union Pacific. 1863 Transcontinental Railroad. Yeah. Which, just remember that. The economic undertow offers better insight into Lincoln's mission. The South, which supplied 75% of exports, was on the cusp of becoming a low-tariff free trade zone. Lincoln feared this would disadvantage the North, in particular his rich industrialist supporters. Much like the Canadian equalization payments through which the government plunders the West, Lincoln imposed punitive tariffs as a means to distribute wealth from the South to the northern manufacturers. And at this time, 60% of the federal national government's income came from tariffs. There was no income tax at the beginning of the Civil War. It all came in from tariffs. Of course, a less malevolent lot than Lincoln's Republicans could have instead edged the nation towards a peaceful prosperity by joining with England, France, and other European countries in the Confederate States between which free trade was underway. But for this, they would have had to scale back tariffs and the political patronage these schemes afforded. Such a requirement could have been inimical to Lincoln's Whig Party. Lincoln was a Whig, Whigs believed in high tariffs, mercantilism, internal improvements. It's kind of like the Democrats of the day. Protectionist tariffs, corporate welfare, and fiat money. You know, Lincoln issued greenbacks to pay for the Civil War, paper money, of our first encounter with fiat money instead of specie.
War bonds?
Well, actually, fiat money is like a war bond, you know. Filling in the gaps in the Lincoln lore would not be complete without his rap sheet of civil liberties abuses. Like Bill Clinton, Lincoln conducted a war without the consent of Congress. He declared martial law, confiscated private property, suspended habeas corpus, imprisoning about 30,000 Northern citizens and 31 legislators without trial. He actually had the Maryland legislature arrested because he was afraid they were going to do a secession resolution. Censored telegraph lines and shut down newspapers for opposing the war. This was Lincoln's civil liberties record. The ignoble institute of slavery dissolved relatively uneventfully in most slave societies around that time, with only Haiti and the United States resorting to violence. This makes Lincoln's victory a Pyrrhic one indeed. Now, I want to spend some time on Lincoln's inaugural address, which I think really nails the case that this article that I just read by Ilana Mercer makes. But I've got somebody on the line here, somebody who wants to talk about secession, etc., and it's nobody other than Paul Zerzan. Okay. Paul, you're one of the few people that I know that has absolutely correct color vision.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, you know, the Southern Constitution did not permit secession. The Southern Constitution did not recognize states' rights, in particular the right of states to outlaw slavery or the right of states to provide refuge to escaped slaves. And the reason the Southern states seceded is made very clear in the declarations of secession. They say very specifically they're seceding over the issue of slavery. If you read them, you'll see that. And now, Congress did not need to declare war because this was not war against a foreign country. The Confederacy was recognized as an independent nation by no country on earth. This was a part of the U.S. that was in active rebellion, and they started the war by attacking Fort Sumter. So this article you're citing is full of misinformation. And of course, at the beginning of the war, very crucial states, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, and Western Virginia sided with the Union. And if we said that the war is about slavery, it's very possible these slave states joined the secession. So it was really important at the beginning of the war that Lincoln deny that this has anything to do with slavery in order to keep them on the side of the Union. But when the Union began winning the war, then it was made clear that this war is actually about slavery. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Well, it's always nice to meet another history buff, Paul. I really thank you for calling in and giving us that information. I'm familiar with the Constitution of the Confederacy and the international status of the Confederacy. The whole Gettysburg attack was the Southern strategy. They figured if they could achieve a victory in the North, they could get London and France to recognize them as an independent state at war with the United States and get some help from them. But of course, that didn't work out very well. But I thank you for calling up and sharing, Paul.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right. So, yeah, Paul makes some good points. The point that I want to concentrate on, though, and this will come out as I go through Lincoln's inaugural address, that Lincoln was a Whig, and Whigs were, part of the Whig Party's platform was internal improvements, transcontinental railroads, canals, etc., high tariffs, and we talked about that earlier, that the United States revenue came primarily from tariffs, which were paid by the southern states. So there's really a good argument, and that's all it is, that the secession was not centered on slavery, but centered on the economic aspects of the rivalry between the North and the South. We can all share our conjectures on this point, and that's about all we can do after all this passage of time. But I do want to read parts of Lincoln's inaugural address. He says, "In compliance with custom as old as the government itself, I appear before you to address you briefly and to take in your presence the oath prescribed by the Constitution to be taken by the President before he enters on the execution of this office. I do not consider it necessary at present for me to discuss those matters of administration about which there is no special anxiety or excitement." Now remember, when Lincoln was inaugurated, 7 states had already seceded. James Buchanan, the president before Lincoln, said, "I'm the last president of the United States." Yeah. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of him who now addresses you, in other words, Lincoln himself. I do but quote from one of those speeches when I declare that, quote, "I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." This is Lincoln when he's being sworn in as President of the United States.
You don't say.
"Those who nominated and elected me did so with full knowledge that I had made this and many similar declarations and had never recanted them. And more than this, they placed in the platform for my acceptance, and as a law to themselves and to me, the clear and emphatic resolution which I now read." So this is the platform of the Republican Party. Started in Ripon, Wisconsin, 1856. I wasn't there, but...
contrary to rumors?
Yeah, contrary to the rumor that Ray's read on his show this morning. Yeah, resolved that the maintenance inviolate of the rights of the states, and especially the right of each state to order and control its own domestic institutions according to its own judgment exclusively, is essential to that balance of power on which the perfection and endurance of our political fabric depend. And we denounce the lawless invasion by armed force of the soil of any state or territory, no matter what pretext, as among the gravest of crimes. Republican platform. Lincoln goes on to say, "I now reiterate these sentiments, and in doing so, I only press upon the public attention the most conclusive evidence of which the case is susceptible, that the property, peace, and security of no section are to be in any wise endangered by the now incoming administration." This means the 7 states that said, "We quit, we're out." I add, too, that all the protection which consistently with the Constitution and the laws can be given will be cheerfully given to all the states when lawfully demanded, for whatever cause, as cheerfully to one section as to another. There is much controversy about delivering up fugitives from service or labor, the so-called Fugitive Slave Act, which was you history buffs will remember was part of the Compromise of 1850. The clause I now read is as plainly written in the Constitution as any other of its provisions. This is from the Constitution. "No person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from such service or labor but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. It is scarcely questioned that this provision was intended by those who made it for the reclaiming of what we call fugitive slaves, and the intention of the lawgiver is the law. All members of Congress swear their support to the whole Constitution, to this provision as much as any other, to the proposition that that slaves whose cases come within the terms of the clause shall be delivered up. Their oaths are unanimous. Now, if they would make the effort in good temper, could they not with equal unanimity frame and pass a law by means of which to keep good that unanimous oath? So Lincoln says, this fugitive slave law that everybody hates so much, that's the law of the land. We got to obey it. There is some difference of opinion whether this clause should be enforced by national or state authority, but surely that difference is not a very material one. If the slave is to be surrendered, it can be of but little consequence to him or others by which authority it is done. And should anyone in any case be content that this oath shall be unkept on a merely unsubstantial controversy as to how it shall be kept? Again, any law upon this subject ought not all the safeguards of liberty known in civilized and human jurisprudence to be introduced, so that a free man may not in any case surrendered as a slave, and might it not be well at the same time to provide by law for the enforcement of that clause in the Constitution which guarantees the citizens of the states are entitled to all privileges and immunities of the citizens in the several states. So this is Lincoln on the Fugitive Slave Act. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs, and then I'll come back to Abraham Lincoln.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Okay, so we're back to Abraham Lincoln and his inaugural address, the speech he gave when he was sworn in as President of the United States on March 4th, 1861. Going on, he said, "I take the official oath today with no mental reservations and with no purpose to construe the Constitution or laws by any hypercritical rules, and while I do not choose now to specify particular acts of Congress as proper to be enforced, I do suggest that it will be much safer for all, both in official and private stations, to conform to and abide by all those acts which stand unrepealed than to violate any of them, trusting to find impunity in having them held to be unconstitutional." Talking about the Fugitive Slave Act. Okay, and then one more paragraph here I think really wraps it up tight. He said, "In doing this, there needs to be no bloodshed." He says, "I therefore consider that in the view of the Constitution and the laws, the Union is unbroken and to the extent of my ability, I will take care, as the Constitution itself expressly enjoins upon me, that the laws of union be faithfully executed in all the states. Doing this, I deem to be a simple duty on my part, and I shall perform it so as practicable, unless my rightful masters, the American people, shall withhold the requisite means or in some authoritative manner direct the contrary. I trust this will not be regarded as a menace, but only as a declared purpose of the Union, that it will be constitutional, that it will constitutionally defend and maintain itself. Then, in doing this, there needs to be no bloodshed or violence, and there shall be none unless it be forced upon the national authority. And that takes us to Fort Sumter, which I'll come back to. The power confided to me will be used to hold, occupy, and possess the property and places belonging to the government, to collect the duties and imposts, customs stations in the ports of the Confederacy. That's all he wants to hang on to. The power confided to me will be used to hold, occupy, and possess the property and places belonging to the government and to collect duties and imposts. Well, if 60% of the governor's revenues comes in from tariffs, you got to hang on to the custom stations, right? And if the southern states want to quit and let him continue to collect the customs, fine, adios. Don't let the door hit you in the butt on your way out. He goes on to say, but beyond that, what may be necessary for these objects, there will be no invasion, no using of force against or among the people anywhere. Where hostility to the United States in any interior locality shall be so great and universal as to prevent competent resident citizens from holding federal offices, there will be no attempt to force obnoxious strangers among the people for that object. So this is really a mouthful. Where hostility to the United States in any interior locality shall be so great and universal as to prevent competent resident citizens from holding federal offices, there will be no attempt to force obnoxious strangers among the people for that object. I'm not going to interfere. Leave my customs collection alone, and I won't interfere with anything, no matter what you do down there. While the strict legal right may exist in the government to enforce the exercise of these offices, the attempt to do so would be so irritating and so nearly impracticable withal that I deem it better to forego for the time the uses of such office. No, not going to use any force. Leave my customs collection alone. Go ahead and do what you want to do. Slaves escaping to the north will comply with the Fugitive Slave Act. So this doesn't sound like he was ready to go to war over slavery. Fort Sumter, if you study what happened at Fort Sumter, there was a small Union garrison there, and the South Carolina militia attempted to capture it, and it was a real cat and mouse game. The Southerners demanded that the Union abandon it. The Union said, we're not going to abandon it. And the trick was to do it, to maneuver in such a way that the South fired the first shot. And that's exactly what happened. The South fired the first. And there's a really interesting, I read a whole book about it. It was really interesting, the tactics used to allow the Union soldiers to survive, because this wasn't done in a day or two. And the South fired the first shot, whereupon Lincoln said, okay, you stepped over the line now. Now we're going to use force. And when he used force, we went from 7 states to 10 states, because Virginia and Tennessee and one other state seceded. Which one was it? Virginia, Tennessee, and It'll come to me before the end of the show. So there you have it. So what it really comes down to is something that I talk about all the time on the show here: a national government versus a federal government. And before the Civil War, according to the articles that I've read, certainly according to Lincoln's inaugural address, everybody thought we had a federal government, except Lincoln, who wanted to make sure we had a national government. And if you look at it in a light most unfavorable to Lincoln, he wanted a national government to keep the tariffs rolling in from the South, keep the tariffs high, protect northern industry from European competition so that southern agricultural regions would have to buy northern products, et cetera, so that we could build transcontinental railroads and canals and et cetera, most of which were in the north. So a little bit of southern history that most people aren't acquainted with. I don't want to apply for the Howard Zinn Award, but Tall Tales is an exercise in critical thinking. We don't always just go for what everybody knows. Sometimes we take things apart and examine them. That's the end of the show for today. And once again, I'm going to say thank you very much. And let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Marking a violent day in U.S. history. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. 1 year ago today, thousands of angry protesters attacked the Capitol trying to overturn the presidential election. Fox's Chad Pergram with more on the event that shocked the nation and the world.
Capitol Police Lieutenant Ted Hopkins organized a counterforce to retake the Capitol last year, fighting for hours that day against the thugs. Hopkins says the riot makes him angry.
I think it was Americans that did this. Americans attacked us. They attacked us as police. They attacked the Capitol, violently broke windows and doors. Yeah, it's an attack on democracy and the peaceful transfer of power.
People gathered in Philadelphia last night for a vigil to remember the 12 people who died in a row house fire yesterday. Among them, 8 children.
Major questions over why the smoke detectors in this burned-out Philadelphia Housing Authority row home in Fairmount were not working. Fire investigators say smoke detector inspections and installation took place in 2019 and 2020 and found that all smoke detectors worked properly.
Dave Kinchin with Fox 29 Philadelphia. Kids in Chicago have to stay home from school again today after the teachers union voted Tuesday to return to remote learning as COVID cases surge.
Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot is warning that she'll take action against teachers who she contends walked off the job illegally. Teachers Union President Jesse Sharkey saying the mayor
has failed to provide adequate staffing, adequate cleaning in the schools, has failed to provide adequate testing.
Lightfoot demanding teachers return to schools and saying via social media that she's doing everything she can to keep students in school. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And the CDC approves Pfizer booster shots for children as young as 12. America's listening to Fox